So this PowerPoint talks about the different types of delivery that there are and the one that we'll be using for all of our speeches. When it comes time for our midterm exam, which is after speeches, you'll be asked to know each of these 3 types of delivery and what their strengths and limitations are. So that's listed here in the PowerPoint. You have access to this. I made sure it was up on D2L last night. But in terms of where we're headed for this, that's what you'll need to know for your midterm. And practically speaking, we're going to use the first one, which is called extemporaneous, for our speeches. And we've covered some of this already in terms of questions that you've asked in class. And you guys are used to this whole PowerPoint thing by now. Sorry. No, there's one more. Go. All right. So what are we looking for as far as delivery goes? What's an effective delivery for our purposes, the types of speeches you're doing here? Really, all you need is a delivery that doesn't distract people and it enhances the message. It doesn't have to be perfect. We've talked about that. It should be conversational, like you're communicating a message, like you're communicating with people as opposed to talking at them. You do that by beginning to practice the basics, things like eye contact, things like voice rate and loudness. And in this class, sometimes this fan goes off and it's really loud. You have to make sure that you speak up. If you're a person who gets nervous and tends to speak quickly, happens for a lot of us, I may be in the back and give you this slow down sign. Look for that and take a deep breath and try to slow down as you're speaking. And that usually fixes it. But really that's where you want to start. Eye contact, rate and loudness, gestures as best that you can. Ways you can do that: observe experienced public speakers. So if you have teachers, it's a good way. Unfortunately, that's what we do all the time, every day, and lots of them are pretty good at it. So you can observe them and see what they do that's effective. You can also view recordings of your own speeches. And have I asked you guys this already? Is anybody brave enough to watch one of their own speeches in the past? Haven't done it? Guess what? Our classes are all recorded. So you can watch your speeches. You don't have to, but you can. With regards to recording, that reminds me of something. In the back of the classroom, there's a monitor where you can see yourself, and we usually turn that off because I've had people say it will just completely distract me and drive me crazy to watch myself, so we turn that off. But it's recorded automatically, so you can watch yourself. And usually, it's better than you think it is, almost always. And even this semester in one of my other classes, I had someone who, at the end of her speech, she was walking back to the back of the classroom and she said, "Oh my gosh, that was terrible. I know that everyone in the room could see me shaking." And all at once, everybody in the class looked at her. "No, we couldn't tell at all. Are you kidding?" And she was so relieved to know that we couldn't tell she was shaking. It just usually feels so much worse when you're up here in the moment than it looks to everybody else. So usually that's a good thing to do. It gives you lots of confidence. You're like, hey, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Okay? So again, conversational, we're not looking for perfection. Can you say Sure you can say It will be just fine. Can you pause and find your spot? Sure you can. Not a problem. Okay? It'll be okay. All right, let's talk about the 4 modes of delivery. There are 4 different types. This is so slow. Extemporaneous, that's the one that we'll be using. Memorize, manuscript, and impromptu. And they're sort of self-explanatory, but we'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each. Extemporaneous mode. Positives. First, it sounds conversational and it's versatile. It really sounds like you're communicating with your audience as opposed to talking at them. It keeps their attention more than if you're reading something and talking at them. And that's what we're trying to do, is have a conversation. Versatile, that means that you don't have every single word planned, so you can adapt. If you need to add another example, you can do that. It's delivered from an outline or from brief notes. So you have notes with you. You should have notes with you. We'll talk about how those notes might look at the end of class today, and there's a really good example in your book. I brought that to give you the page. And it's not practiced to the point of memorization, so there'll be differences each time you practice it, and that's just fine. But you should practice it, and you should have notes. It's not an off-the-cuff sort of thing. And the notes will help you keep on track. They will help you stay focused. If you go off on a tangent, you look back at your notes, it brings you back to your main ideas. That's what they are there for, and you should have them and use them. Negatives, here they come. You guys know this already. It requires considerable effort and practice. So in order to have notes, in order to have an outline, you have to do your research. You have to plan in advance, and you guys are doing that. You have those today. But it does require that effort. And then variations could change the meaning depending on how you do it each time. And we oftentimes, when students give speeches, will find that somebody gets nervous and they kind of go off on a tangent and they have to bring themselves back to the content of their speech. It happens, and that's what this is talking about. Since you're not reading it word for word, you can go off in different directions in terms of variation. And it happens. It's not the end of the world. You just come back to your notes and go back to what you had planned. So that's extemporaneous. That's the one we're doing. The next one is memorized. It's coming. There's one more. Yes. Okay. Obviously, with memorized mode, you memorize your whole presentation, including your gestures and movement. How many of you have done a play or some type of theater in the past? In second grade? Probably even in second grade, they did what would be called blocking the play. So at this point, we move downstage to the right. And at this point, you'll gesture up to the back of the room and have this sort of movement as you say this line. That would be memorized mode. You memorize the whole thing, each word, the place you'll be, the gestures that you plan to use, and it definitely has a place. There is a strength for it when the performance itself is more important than two-way communication with your receivers. So in a big room like that where you're doing a play, they don't get to raise their hand and ask a question or look at you and think that they're hoping you're going to get another example. It's one-way communication. And the advantages of it really allows for the maximum use of your delivery skills because you can plan everything. But there are some negatives. I'll wait till it's a little bit louder and more scary before we run away. Our fire alarm is doing something. Okay. Disadvantages. First of all, there's little or no adaptation that you can do because you've memorized every word, you've memorized every gesture, you've got it all planned out. So if they don't get it, too bad, you can't adapt. Recovery is more difficult after you make a mistake. So if you just have it memorized, you don't have notes in front of you, if you forget, you're kind of screwed. You just stand there and hope you remember. That's why we don't do that. And then in addition, it can sound memorized like you're not communicating with the people in the audience, and that's not what we want. This one is Manuscript, and this is, this is what some of you are going to try to do. Lots of times when students are really nervous about giving a speech, what they try to do is write a paper, bring it up here, and try to read it. That would be a manuscript delivery. There are advantages to doing that, and this is why students do it. It prevents slip of the tongue and poor wording, so you know for sure exactly what you're going to say. You feel like you're less worried about it. And then each word can be planned and defended. There is a point at which that's also appropriate, and usually it's for political speakers or in a situation where the speech that you're giving is really important and people will be analyzing every word of it. And in that case, you usually have a teleprompter that you get to read. We are just not that cool. We don't have a teleprompter that you can read. In those situations, what happens is this whole list of disadvantages. So there is one significant advantage. There are 5 disadvantages to this. Number 1, it reduces eye contact. If you have a manuscript up here, word for word of what you want to say, I promise you, no matter how much you practice it, you will stand here and read it and look at it. And that right there, it's that the basic things that we want to try to do well, eye contact is the first one, and that goes out the window with the manuscript. There's no audience adaptation. First of all, since you're not looking at them, you don't know whether they get it or they don't get it. And if you're reading word for word, you're not going to be able to provide another example or answer a question, and that's a problem. Usually what happens is when you have a manuscript that you're holding on to like this, you're holding on to it for dear life, and that means no gestures whatsoever. There's no 1, 2, final, last demonstrating points. So that happens too. It affects vocal variety, and you guys know this. When you hear people give speeches and they come up here and they have notes, there's a tone of voice that we get when we start reading it. You guys, I mean, you can tell that instantly. I can tell that too as a teacher when you guys are reading instantly. And what happens is, most of the time, we turn off because we know that we're not involved in this communication situation. They're just talking at me. And that's a problem. It just sounds like it's read, and that's not what we want to do. And lastly, it can be too fast or too slow. So manuscript has its place in certain situations, but that's not what we're doing. So please don't think that this is the best option for you. Use the notes, and we'll talk about what will work best to guide you, but don't have a word-for-word thing that you plan to read. Now, there is a caveat to that, and that's your situation here. She said, I have some sources that I want to cite, some information that I want to use in my speech, and you didn't have to do that for this speech, but maybe some of you do have that. When you do that, if it's a quotation and you're going to be giving credit to somebody else, then it's particularly important that you say it correctly and you're going to give them credit for it. So you would want to write that out, type it out, and you can read that quote. You would also give an oral footnote. And then if you're doing this, go ahead and write this down. And we will, if you think you're going to have a source that you use, write this down. But we'll cover it more before your next speech because everyone will be doing it for that speech. But what you need to include is the author's name. So you need to have author. You need to have the title of the work or the title of the website. That's the second thing. And the third thing you need to have is the date that it was published or the date that you accessed it. And you begin it by saying, according to, those actual words. You say, according to, and you give the author, Joe Smith, on the website titled, The Moon is Made of Blue Cheese, accessed on February 14th, 2016. And then you say whatever it is that you want to say from that website. Okay.
Do you use a published date over the access date if it's there?
Yes, you do. You do use the published date over access date if it's there. You guys have done sources, cited pages, and bibliographies for other classes, right? If you use a source, you need to include that sources, cited page, or bibliography at the end of your outline. And when you do that, you start by looking for the published date on a website, and most of the time you can't find it, and then you do the access date. And the same is true for your oral citation or oral footnote. If you can find the published date, that's what you want to use. But most of the time you can't find it, so you just use the access date. So that's the quick and dirty with that. The time that you would use a manuscript, you read specifically what the quotation is, but we'll cover that more next time.
Do they have to be like peer-reviewed, scholarly, or like if you have something fun to say, you can just...
You still want to give credit, but especially for these speeches, like you're talking about concerts, you may have something from an artist, from a magazine that's definitely not, or a website that's definitely not a scholarly reviewed article. For these speeches especially, the number of relevant sources is really broad. So just make sure that you give credit where credit is due, but at this point, it's pretty broad. Okay, the last one, impromptu. You don't have to do an impromptu speech for this class. Yay, right? But let me tell you about impromptus, the positives, and there are a bunch. Come on. Okay, first of all, impromptu is when you're obviously speaking and you don't have time to prepare in advance. When these come up, the first benefit really that you can think of related to these is that you will have more opportunities to contribute I'm going to do it this way. Maybe. There are more opportunities to contribute. If you're in a work environment and they ask for someone to give their opinion about something, that's giving an impromptu speech. You'll have more opportunities to contribute, show what you know, your experience, your background, if you're comfortable with impromptu speeches. And the second thing that's a positive about them is that it is not hard to develop skill and confidence with impromptu speaking. And we don't do it in this class, but if you have ever considered taking a more advanced public speaking class, you'll do impromptu speeches. And we teach you about how to structure them, how to put them together in a way that's organized. And I'm here to tell you that if you take that with you to a job interview, you sound like a rock star, because you have learned how to do this. You tell them what you're going to give them in terms of information, you give them all the detail, you review your main points, and you look like you know what you're talking about. So impromptus, they actually have very much real-world significance, and I encourage you to think about doing them. And the negatives, you guys know. First of all, there's no audience analysis that you can do, usually, because you don't know what you're going to be speaking about, so you can't determine what they do and don't already know about it. And it takes a moment to compose your thoughts and identify your main points. And you don't get time to practice your response. But they're really something that you can get better at. Last thing related to delivery and practice, and then we'll talk about speaking apprehension for a minute. That's pretty short. This is just practical guidelines. As I finish my speech and I get ready over the weekend because I have to give my speech on Tuesday and I'm starting to practice, what kinds of things do I need to think about? What do I need to do? First one is you need to practice out loud. And I know that you want to sit there and do it in your head. Don't. Because I promise you, when you stand up to deliver a speech and you hear yourself speaking, all of a sudden it becomes very distracting to hear your own voice. So that doesn't mean that you can't think about it, but when you practice your speech, practice it out loud, as odd as it feels, because it desensitizes you to that, and when you come up here, it's much less distracting. Similarly, you need to practice standing up, because you'll be standing up when you deliver your speech. And for lots of folks, the difference between being comfortable and not comfortable is this idea that if you let me do this from my chair in the classroom, I am so good. But as soon as you make me stand up in front of everybody, that's when it's a problem. So, baby steps along the way, practice standing up. You're not in front of everybody at home when you're practicing, but you're practicing standing up. So that's part of what is important. Next thing is practice from beginning to end. That doesn't mean that if you have trouble with the introduction, you don't practice it by itself. You can do that. There's no problem with that at all. But what it does mean is as you know the speech, you're practicing, you get through the introduction, you get to your second main point, and you mess up. You want to start back over again at the introduction. Don't. keep going. Because when you keep going, what you're practicing is messing up and continuing on. And when you're giving your speech, you don't get to start over. You have to be able to mess up and continue on. So you just stop, you take a minute to compose yourself and look at your notes, and go on from where you are. So practice that too. Other things, need to practice with your speaking notes. Once you have your full outline created, you put together notes that you're going to use to deliver your speech. Those are your speaking notes. Practice with that actual sheet of paper, because it's meant to guide you and keep you on track. If when you give your speech, you take out this piece of paper that you've never looked at before, ever, you get stuck, you have no idea on that sheet of paper where the information is that you need, right? You've never looked at it before. But if you've practiced with it, you know about where the third main point is on your sheet of paper, and that will help you more than if you've never used those notes before. So practice with them. How many times do I need to practice? I get asked that a lot. Somewhere between 5 and 10 all the way through is what you want to do. After 10, you're just torturing yourself, so don't do that. But about 5, and then you'll know it pretty well. I like this one. Practice in front of an audience, in quotation marks, because we always encourage you to bribe your family and friends to listen to your speech so that they can give you feedback before you do it in class. But I had one student tell me one time, a long time ago, that she couldn't get anybody to listen to her speech. So she took her little sister's stuffed animals and set them up around the room and practiced her speech in front of those stuffed animals. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, that's not bad. And the reason would be this. You'll look at the elephant, and then you'll look at the teddy bear, and then you go and look over at the duck, and you come back to the dog, and you're still practicing looking at each of the eyes in the room. And you still have this idea that something is watching you. And that helps with developing eye contact and scanning the room, which is what you want to do. Last, practice in front of a mirror. Lots of people talk about doing that. You're welcome to give that a try. If you find it distracting, like, oh, I hate it when I do this and my gestures are too big and you critiquing yourself to death, then just walk away from the mirror because it's not productive. But you might give it a try. And last thing, the reason it's on the bottom, is practice with visual aids. This speech, you're not required to have one. But if you want to use a PowerPoint, you can. If you have a specific object that you're bringing to class to use, then practice with it, because oftentimes if you don't practice with the object, you'll get up, you'll be giving your speech, you'll go through your conclusion, you'll give your ending remarks, and there's that PowerPoint presentation on slide 1 still, or there's that snowboard over there and you've never talked about it. We forget. So practice with it so it's not something that is unfamiliar to the process. Okay? Questions about those things? All right, one more before we get on to your outlines. It's just the speaking apprehension thing. And overall, you guys weren't, as a class, really high in terms of numbers for speaking apprehension, but there were a couple people. And this never hurts. When we talk about the apprehension, we talk about it as being nervous in terms of anticipating or actually speaking to an audience. Because even if I were to say at the last minute you didn't have to do it, a lot of people are still nervous beforehand, and that contributes to the whole experience. So that's how we talk about it, is including the whole thing. And if you look at this chart here, what it talks about is how we feel in terms of anticipation and anxiety when it comes to speaking situations for almost everybody. I mean, you can't put that significant of a blanket, but it's fairly true. You have this anticipation phase, which is before your presentation, and you're pretty nervous about it. Some of you entered that as soon as you signed up for the speech class and it said speech, right? You're nervous about it. It comes time to give your speech and it hits the heights. That's the confrontation stage. It's when you stand up to give your speech in that first minute. But look what happens after that. And that's what I want you guys to see, is that it begins to subside right away. And by the time we are at 4 to 5 minutes, you're back down to kind of where you feel now, which is a manageable sort of place. So what I want you to take away from that is this here, that for lots of folks, that whole thing is biologically based, right? Some of us are just born more nervous about these kinds of situations than others. For some of us, it has to do with previous experience. If we've had a bad experience before, then it makes us nervous about doing it again. For some of us, it's that I've just never had to do it before, so I'm nervous about it because I don't know what's going on. How do we fix that? Preparation, skills in class, making sure you have a good speech to present. And then lots of people are nervous because of that idea of evaluation. People are going to be looking at me. They think I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm going to sound silly. That chart again. Where does it get better? As soon as you get up to do it. So just be brave. Be brave enough to get up and get started. It will get better. And all of these things are true. We're not discounting any of this. We'll talk about how to deal with those things, but it will get better. You just have to be brave enough to get up and get started. It'll get better once you get going. What I want to talk about is the evaluation thing at the bottom. This is an intro public speaking class. No one expects you to be perfect, number one. Number two, I'm here to tell you that the people in your classroom are not there just tearing you apart. They are in the same boat that you're in, and they're nervous about giving a speech in the same way that you are, and they're pulling for you to do well. You all want each other to do well. Who wants to sit down there and watch somebody come up here and bomb their speech? It makes you uncomfortable, right? You're uncomfortable for them. You want them to do well. So in terms of evaluation, at least for this environment, that's not what's happening. You're all pulling for each other, so worry a bit less about that. Ways to help that, communication orientation, that's the biggest one. You don't have to be perfect. You're communicating with people, not doing a show. I think this goes on in more detail prior. In terms of visualization, that's the idea that you picture yourself doing well as opposed to picturing yourself not doing well over and over again, right? Reinforce the positive as opposed to the negative. That's really important. Relaxation exercises, you guys know about those kinds of things. For our purposes, deep breath before you get started. It really helps. So one in your seat before you stand up to go, and a deep breath before you get started here. It really helps to slow things down. Systematic desensitization, we've talked about that, the baby steps along the way. We've been doing those things, and you're pretty good for that. Cognitive restructuring is where this next goes. There we go. You guys heard of negative self-talk. You know what I'm getting at, right? This talks about how we think about a situation and changing it to something that's more positive. Negative, I'm afraid I'll stumble over my words and look foolish. You don't have to worry about that. I do that all the time. So you guys don't have to worry about that. Instead, you say, even if I stumble, I will have succeeded as long as I get my message across, right? You don't have to be perfect. Stumbling's okay. I'm afraid everyone will be able to tell that I'm nervous. Here's my favorite. Duh! Is it acceptable and appropriate to be nervous when giving a speech? Yeah, so what if they can tell that you're nervous? It's an appropriate sort of thing. But the truth is they probably won't be able to tell. And again, as long as you focus on getting your message across, even if you look nervous, that's what matters. These kinds of statements where you reevaluate the negative self-talk and turn it into a more realistic, positive one is what I want you guys to focus on if you're really nervous. And there are two more examples here on the PowerPoint presentation. And those things there just talk about the dress, which we already covered, and then, again, practice hints. They're very similar. So questions about things that we've covered today. Different types of delivery methods, number one. What you can have up here when you present your speech, questions about that? Can you use a visual aid if you want to? Yes. So please do that if you want. Can you have notes? Yes, you should have notes. Can you say, Yes, I hope you have something else to say, but is okay. All right. Where we are now, and we're in a good spot in terms of time, is at looking at those outlines. So take out the outline that you have, whatever it is that you have with you. Take that out, and I want you to find a partner that you're going to work with. A small group of 3 is fine, but especially in Kingsport, that's fine. But more than that's too many, so 2 or 3. And let's talk about what needs to be included in these. Excuse me. Yes. Question is?
I saw on the outline checklist that we need transitions, and obviously that's very important. But can the transition be hidden within the first, first, second, and third main point, or do they need to be separate from those?
So if you have, for example, a transition within your first main point.
And then I'm talking about my first point.
Okay, that, we'll get to that. Between main points, that's great. To begin would be what we would consider a signpost. A transition has to be a complete sentence. So why don't we start with transitions, since we're here. So on your outline, or that you have in front of you, start with your own first. What I want for you to do is identify at least one. You're supposed to have 2, but by today you should at least have 1 transition statement. And those transition statements are complete sentences that connect ideas together. So you're getting ready to start your first main point, you said, and you put in the phrase "to begin," correct? That would be a signpost as opposed to a transition. Lets us know where we are. We're getting started with our main points. To make that into a transition, you simply turn it into a complete sentence. So you would say, now that I've introduced you to the topic and let you know the main points I'm going to cover, I'd like to begin with my first main point.
So take the "to begin" off of the first point and move it to its own sentence?
Yes, take it off of the first point and turn it into its own complete sentence. That takes a signpost and turns it into a transition. Should you have both? Yes, lots of signposts. They're good. But in terms of transition, the complete sentence statement, you should have 2 overall in your speech. And the most likely places are between your introduction and your first main point, between your main points and your conclusion. However, if you have one within your main point, as you talk about the subpoints going from one to the next, that's also fine. There just need to be 2 somewhere in your speech. So identify 1. I want you to share that 1 with your partner. If you have a signpost rather than a transition statement, work with your partner to turn it into a complete sentence that connects those 2 things. Okay? And we'll just start with transitions. Off we go. If you don't have one yet, you can go ahead and start one, create one now. It doesn't take a long time. Remember, we can use time orientation after I've discussed. Next, I will discuss one after another. You can use compare and contrast, just important as the bindings are the boots when looking at the parts of a snowboard. Just as important. That's a complete sentence connecting the 2 main ideas, binding and boots. Yes, ma'am. Button.
When you talk about citing your sources, what if the citation sounds better at the end of the sentence? Could you say it and then say, whatever according to...
You can do that. Yes, okay. You can do that. You can put it at the end. And again, we'll get into that. You also, generally speaking, don't have to use the exact words according to. There are lots of ways you can say it. As long as you provide the information, you're fine. But usually, it's so awkward to begin with. For this speech, I just say, use according to, and off you go. But if you want to put it at the beginning or the end, that's fine.
Yeah, like in the first part of the sentence, it's like my words, and then I have to use calculations. And I got the calculations. That's fine, just so I didn't have to actually calculate myself.
Right. So your words, calculations, and then you'll do the citation for the calculations. That's just fine. Very good. This is just rough draft. I'm not using the checklist to grade your rough draft. So don't worry about it. You'll need to submit a final copy for your speech, and that's when everything needs to be in there. So for the rough draft, it's like, okay, do we really have 3 main points? Then you're probably fine. Do we have some sort of introduction and conclusion here? Then you're probably fine. So I wouldn't worry about, is it a complete transition or a signpost? Not a big deal. That's... You just had to begin. That's a signpost.
Well, I don't want to say, like, the transition and then get it from there.
Well, that would be, the signpost would be within the transition. First of all, that's fine. When you get to your conclusion, have you said something like to wrap it up or in conclusion? There you go. There's another signpost. When you talk about your second main point, have you said something like next or second? You can do that very easily.
I just feel like if you have a smooth transition, then the signpost isn't necessary.
Possibly true. Yes. If you have a smooth transition, then signposts may not be necessary.
Secure. The first one is the board itself, and then the second is bindings.
Mm-hmm.
So my transition is secure connection between the board and bindings is a major priority when snowboarding. So that leads into the binding itself. So I don't feel like I wouldn't know what to put as a signpost there.
You might then, after that, say something like, so to discuss the bindings. So, again, when we're talking about the difference between writing and speeches, and this is important because we begin to get really artful. We don't want them to miss the fact that we've moved from our first main point to the second because the transition was so smooth, we're already off on our way and they don't know. So connecting them and then saying, so to begin the discussion of the binding, that wouldn't be bad. I'm not saying that you absolutely have to have it because I don't see what's there. But that would be another way to incorporate a signpost as well as a great transition between the two. All right, questions about transitions? No? Those are excellent questions. That tells me you actually have a speech in front of you, which is a good sign. All right, let's go back to, this is the format of the outline, and I don't expect that this will take very long because most of you had done outlining before. So a lot of this you're going to do yourself and not with your partner because it's format as opposed to content, and I'm going to go kind of quick between the two. But I want you to look at it. First of all, your main points, and I'm not worried about this one, need to be labeled with Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3. So you should have between 2 and 5 main points in your speech somewhere. On your outline, they should have a Roman numeral next to them, 1, 2, or 3. Make sure that that is the case. And this may not be true. Those main points need to be stated in complete sentences. So if you have a phrase as opposed to a complete sentence, write in the margin there, turn it into a sentence. Or, in fact, turn it into a complete sentence right now. But those main points need to be in complete sentences. In terms of structure, they're at the far left side of the page. I'm not worried about that either. The supporting material, the things that you want to say about your main points, should be capital letters A, B, and C. And check just that your format is correct. Depending on which version of Word you have, it likes to format it differently. You can fix that by going up to the top where it has the numbers and the bullet points there, and you can restructure the way it's put together so it does it correctly for you. But I've yet to use any version of Word where it actually is right. But make sure that those supporting materials are capital letters A, B, and C. And those need to be in complete sentences too. So look at those on your paper If they're not in complete sentences, please write a note to yourself in the margin or somewhere that says, turn it into a complete sentence. And those are tabbed one over from your main points. You guys know I have kids. I have an 11-year-old who, in his science class, I don't know why, his science teacher gives them PowerPoint presentations, and they're like 50 slides in these rotten things. I'm like, have you lost your mind? They're 11. They're so done after number 5. What's this whole 50 thing about? But she puts them in an outline structure, and he didn't understand, why does she do this? What is the point? And one of the things that we talked about and that is important in terms of outlines is that they don't just give you the information. It's something that's a visual representation of how important everything is. If you look at an outline, everything that's really important, your main ideas, are shoved all the way over to the left. That's where your Roman numerals are. And as it becomes less important or more detailed, it gets tabbed over farther and farther to the right. So I was telling him that's part of what she's trying to get you to learn is what are the important things. They're the things that are all the way over on the left side. As it gets way over to the middle with the 1s and 2s, that's detail stuff. So for your own understanding of your speech, the important stuff, the main point should be to the left. Your A's and B's are tabbed over 1, and both of those things are in complete sentences. By the time we get to the details, the 1s and the 2s, that comes after your A's and B's. That might be a list, a listing of the 5 things. And it doesn't have to be in complete sentences at that point because we're at detail level. If it is a specific story as an example that you've included, it might be complete sentences. But at that point, it depends on your particular outline. Questions about that format stuff? You guys are probably good. Last thing is, if you're planning to include sources, that information, I need a sources cited page at the end. That can be MLA, it can be APA, it can be Chicago style, I don't care. Just cover your butt and my butt and give me a sources cited page of some type, okay? Are we good with structure? Because here we go to content. This is the hardest one. This is what I'm looking for. Bigger. We've talked about the introduction, and it has 5 different things in it. To begin with, I want you to point to your attention getter on your page. You should have a plan. It should be there. I want you to put your finger on it, and it needs to be the first thing on your piece of paper, right? We don't start with, hi, my name is, or today I'm going to talk about. We start with the attention getter. So you need to have a plan. It needs to be the first thing. I want you to identify your thesis statement, your 1 or 2 sentences that tell me the topic of your speech. In your introduction, find that. I want you to look for your listener relevance link and your speaker credibility. So that statement that says how the topic relates to you, in essence why you chose it, and something that relates the topic to them somehow. Asks them about it, talks about a situation, you give them an example, something that relates it to them. Make sure that is there. And the last thing is the preview statement. I want you to identify that, and I want you to share that with your partner. You should be able to clearly say, here's my preview, here's my list of things I'm going to cover, and you should be able to share that with your partner, just like that. Make sure it's there and go ahead and do that. Good. I see that you guys are not having problems finding that. That's important. I'm glad to see that. Questions about previous statements at all? All right. Moving on. Here's where I would have talked about transitions. You guys are good with transitions at this point? Here, I'll give you a midterm question now. What's the difference between a signpost and a transition statement? Give it to me, man.
Transition is between like in the introduction or main points and the conclusion, and the signpost is letting you know exactly what you're about to talk about.
Mm-hmm. A signpost lets you know exactly where you are, what you're about to talk about. Transition statement will be a complete sentence between major parts usually. So again, a transition can't be 2 words. First, next, in conclusion. That's a signpost, and that is a question on your midterm exam. It asks for the difference between a signpost and a transition statement. They're both important, but they're different things. All right, let's see. This is important. Here we go. On to the body of your speech. You need to have between 2 and 5 main points that are clearly defined and in a structure we have discussed. So this is just a straw poll. Put your hands up. How many of you were able to find some structure other than topical? So cause and effect, pro and con, chronological. If you use something other than topical, put your hand in the sky. Yes, pat yourself on the back. That makes me happy. Very good. And why do we not use topical overall? You remember that one? Why do we avoid that? It doesn't help them remember or understand at all, right? It's our job as a speaker to give them the map, to tell them what's coming, help them to understand. And if the only thing you can give them to remember is the 3 main reasons, you're really not helping them. If you can say pros and cons, that's a structure they're familiar with and it helps them to remember. So that's why we avoid topical if at all possible. What I want for you to do, and we're going to look at number 2 here, is balance supporting material sufficient to explain your points and fill time. So if you have 3 points, for example, on your outline, and point number 1 takes up this much space on your paper, and point number 2 takes up this much space on your paper, and point number 3 takes up that much space on your paper, then it's probably not very balanced, right? We try to go for balanced. Sometimes it doesn't work, but the red flag is this. If 1 and 2 are very small and 3 is very large, then maybe I haven't explained sufficiently, described sufficiently, provided enough examples for 1 and 2. So please look at your paper, and it shouldn't take much, remember, because they're like tabbed over and you can see where 1 starts and 1 stops. Are they kind of balanced? They don't have to be exact, but if they're very different, write yourself a note in the margin and say, maybe reconsider making this part longer or adding more there. We've talked about transitions and signposts and citations. Okay, here's where I would cover citations. Any questions about oral footnotes or what you have to say? You had a question about a picture, right? So her question was, if it's my own image versus an image I got from the internet, what do I do about it? For a PowerPoint presentation, for example, you would put the image up there, and you would create the citation that you're going to have to put in your, that you would put in your sources cited page. You just copy it and paste it at the bottom of the image on the page. And because we can all see it, you don't even have to reference it. We know based on the fact that that citation is there, that it comes from another source, and that's it. That's the easiest. You don't have to say anything about it at all. But if it is your own image, doesn't that give you more credibility as a speaker? So you want to say, I did this myself, or I took this picture at this museum, or whatever happened, because usually that, again, gives you more credibility. But you don't have to. It's just because we would assume it was yours if you didn't give credit to somebody else. All right. Going to the end. All right. Check for your conclusion. You need a signpost to let us know that you are finishing up. So in conclusion, to summarize, to wrap things up, you can write those words word for word on your piece of paper to help you remember to say them. But there ought to be something there. And then for the conclusion, identify your review of main points. Put your finger on that. And here's where I'm going to get some of you, I promise. Leave your finger right there on your review of main points. Take your other pointer finger and put it on the different statement that is your ending statement. Because we don't review to end up. You have to have a final remark. So if your one finger's on top of the other finger and you just have a review statement but not a review statement and an ending remark, you need to add an ending remark. And that usually happens. We run out of energy. We feel like we're done when we've reviewed our main points. But you need an ending statement. What kinds of things can you do? Stories, statistics, examples, quotations. You can put up another visual aid. All the things that count as attention getters at the beginning, you can utilize for an ending statement as well. All right. You feel like you know what needs to be in there, even if you don't have it. You know where you need to go. Are there any specific questions? And then I'll take general from everybody, and then if you want to stay and ask specific questions, I'll start with the folks in Kingsport and then in here individually to help you finish out. But are there general questions? Something I've forgotten?
When you do your notes from the outline, and then on our outline that we submitted on D2L, are you going to review that and send it to us over the weekend, or no?
I'd love to be able to say yes. And the ones that I'm going to start with are the folks that speak on Tuesday. And probably what I'll do is I'll review them all. If there's not a significant problem, I'll just post your grade and off I'll go. If there is a significant problem, I'll reply to that Dropbox and you'll know. And I'll start with the ones that are on Tuesday. So most of you will probably hear nothing from me. You'll just see a 5 out of 5 for the the outline and leave it at that. But I'll look at them all, and if there's something significant, I'll definitely let you know. But I'm not going to write as much as I will when I grade them officially the last time. Let's talk about speaking notes. Yes, ma'am, while I look that up.
If you've already posted it on D2L, your outline, but you've made some changes to it after we've gone through it, do you need to resubmit it or not?
You don't have to. If the first time you know that there were problems with it, significant problems, and you got that fixed after today, then do post it so I don't put together a long-winded email to tell you something that you already know. That would be my only caveat. Because I spend a long time writing emails. I really do. Let's see. Chapter 14, delivering presentations. Where is it? Here it is. On page 394 was the sample speech outline that we looked at before, and that's they call it the preparation outline, and that's the type of thing that you turn in. That's on 394. If you go past that to the next outline in your textbook, they provide a sample speaking outline. And that should give you an idea of what kind of information you would include in your speaking outline, how much stuff should be there. It takes those long sentences and turns them into the phrases that remind you about what you're going to be saying. It doesn't include, for a bunch of things, it won't include your signposts because you've already done that. If you need it on your speaking outline, then put it on there. Whatever you need, this is up to you. You don't turn it into me. But again, in your textbook, 394 is where the sample speaking outline or sample preparation outline, the one you turn in, and then there's a sample speaking outline here. So reference that. It should help.
So we can't use the outline. So
you could practice with it first. Honestly, when I give speeches, I use a full sentence outline also. But what I do is I highlight certain parts of it that I know I need practice with. Here's something I want to remember to say very clearly. I don't end up reading it. If you're going to, and that's why I say practice with it, if you're going to end up reading it, then you need to cut down the information that you have so that you don't read it. My kids, I guess because it's the whole mom thing, I don't let them do that. My high school age kids are already giving speeches and presentations and stuff. And I don't let him do it because he's the kind of kid that if he has it, I'm telling you, he's reading it. So he gets keywords and phrases, and he thinks he's pretty cool because he teaches all of his friends now.
how scripted can the introduction itself be? Because I know how important the 4 or 5 topics are within that.
That is a good question. And a lot of times in a lot of places, teachers will allow you to have a manuscript introduction and a manuscript conclusion because there's so many things in that introduction that have to be there. So you can err on the side of more for your introduction because you're right. Like you said, there's so much packed in there. You don't want to forget any of it. Just practice so that you don't begin and establish the relationship with your audience by doing that. But that's a good question. And I used to do speeches that way. Let people have a manuscript introduction and conclusion for that reason. Other questions? Okay, I have to take official attendance because you get class participation points for being here today and helping each other with your outline. So say here very loudly, and I'll get it done quickly. I can get a pen out of my purse. Okay, Tyler, Jessica, Michaela, Nick, Jasmine, Thomas, Vicky, Tyler, Matt, Kristen, Robert, Eric, Destiny, Britt. Oh, she's not here. Mara, Will, Elena. I know they're not.
I'm here.
Gavin.
Here.
All right, good. Mara was.
I'm Will. I'm here too. There just wasn't a speaker near me.
Thank you. It's just Mara. Good. Okay, so you'll all get credit for being here today. Any general questions? Nope. Then if you don't have specific questions for me, you are welcome to go. I will see you all on Tuesday, and we'll get a speaking order ready and get you going. In Kingsport, do any of you have individual questions, things you'd like help with as far as your outlines go? No? All right, you guys are out of here too. Have a good weekend. All right, anyone have questions still here? Yes, I think I have one question. Yes.
So when we deliver our speech, is it as important to say first, you will blah, 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 second, blah, 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 and make sure we have to say the transaction or transition even if we're not on the outline? Yes. No.
I would, that's kind of what I do with the specific words and the highlight. When I go between my main points, I highlight the word first. I highlight the word second because I know in my mind the highlights are my main points. So when I'm getting ready to go to the next one, I gotta get, that's my benchmark. I'm feeling comfortable. I know where I'm headed. And the thing that I see is the word second. That's what I've highlighted. So I'll say it because it's there highlighted. And then I don't include the rest of the transition at all on my speaking notes because I'm already saying it because I highlighted just that first word. That's what works for me. You'll have to practice.
I think it's funny though that we're like asking those questions and we don't even give ours till Thursday.
Are you both?
Yeah.
That's good. It makes my job easy because if I forget something, you guys ask questions about it. Yeah. Questions? No? All right. Then I'm back here then. What you got?
One, what normally is set up. Normally, I mean, they're obviously set up, but these are tacked over a lot more.
Oh, that's fine. I'm not worried about that at all.
And then transitions, I'm not really sure about.
That's perfect.
I read that one.
Wait, the first main topic is oh, and then you talk about. Okay, yep, I get it. And what was your next question? The next one, okay. Okay, that's fine. You're talking about how important it is. Good. How it tells how they connect with each other. Perfect. Good. Yeah, sure. But in terms of content, yes, that's wonderful. You don't have